ADDIE is an acronym for the 5 instructional design phases of the ADDIE training model, or framework, if you want to call it that. And those 5 phases are analysis, design, development, implementation, and evaluation. So how do you use all of that? A high-level perspective of the ADDIE phases starts with the analysis phase. And that's when you're going to analyze the needs of your learners. You're going to assess what is the current knowledge of the subject matter at the time in your course that you have or material. And you're going to determine what gaps, if any, need to be filled in the learning content. And so instructional designers will then need to determine what the audience knows now and then what they still need to learn. And in this analysis phase, there's some questions that you can ask. Things like what, where, when, why, who, and how, those typical questions. But some examples where you might want to dig in are, what is the need to be addressed by this training? What does this training, or why does this training need to be done now? Why is it so important that it's done? Who is the audience for the training? You have to know who that is in order to create content that's going to be relevant to the exact learning audience. Another question could be, what does the audience already know about the subject? Because you may want to not include some extra information that they already know. These are things that you have to consider. What tools are best for this type of information to be shared with the learner? So how the learner absorbs or digests the content, consumes it, is going to be really important to determine how you are going to, which tools you're going to use to serve it up. How will the training be evaluated for success? You can put a wonderful course out there and it might look wonderful, but if it's not meeting the needs of the learner, then how successful is that course? And how are you going to evaluate that? And then another question you can ask is, when does the training need to be completed? Because that's a consideration for your timelines for development and delivery as well. So that's the analysis phase. Then if we look at the next phase, which is the design phase, that's where you take the information that you gathered in the analysis phase and you're going to review it even deeper to figure out, based on the answers, now what are the learning objectives of this content that we're going to develop? And then what evaluation tools are you going to use to assess the learner's knowledge? You may have some already lined up as to what your go-to tools are, but you always have to consider about that final learner experience and how that's going to be received. What is the structure of the material going to be like as it's delivered? Is it going to be in modules, lessons? How short is it going to be? How long is it going to be? Also think about, what are the learner's knowledge and skills that are going to be required to learn and also retain that material? Because learning it is one thing, but what's going to help to reinforce those concepts that you really want them to hone in on and take away from this training that you're developing? And then what is the duration of each learning session and a course on a whole, if that's what you're looking to develop? Now, the model, the ADDIE model, will suggest that you could use a storyboard, for example, or a script of what the program content should be, and that can help you in visualizing what the scope is going to be for the material that you actually have to create. And that can help you, once you have that framework, it's like a map or a guideline, and that can help you speed up the development process because you know what the milestones are going to be. Now, outputs of the design phase should include a course outline, because that's going to be the blueprint for your course that's going to be written. And also, what is the overall course design going to look like? And then optionally, you could have a storyboard or a script if your intended output of a course is going to be e-learning, for example, some self-paced training online, or if it's going to be a video. So it might be a bit different than if you're designing for an instructor-led training offering. So then we move from the design phase into the develop phase. And that's where you're going to develop those training assets that are going to align with the learning objectives and the topics that you defined earlier when you were looking at the design phase and also earlier the analysis phase. You have to ensure that the content is going to be relevant, is going to be meaningful to the learner, and then that will help with retention of what the learner is learning about it. And in this phase, you might also want to have some reviews by subject matter experts because you want to ensure that the content is accurate and that you're getting the course approved before it's actually released, and that you have the subject matter experts and reviewers aligned with you and on board and supporting what you are developing. That can go a long way. So activities in the develop phase include that you would write the course content and you would lay it out visually. How is it going to look? You would create graphics, you would record videos if you're going to use those in the training. You should consider some presentation details, like what are the fonts going to be, colors used, maybe there's branding, but also colors if you're looking at highlighting things or bringing the learner's attention to some details. You want to be sure the fonts are readable and that the learner is not distracted from the content that they're trying to learn and focusing more on some other aspects like trying desperately to read very small font or font that's very difficult to read. Think about global audiences who may work in different languages. You want it to be presented very clearly. And also in this phase, you would also consider how you are going to assemble the course. So as I had mentioned, you want to get subject matter experts and reviewers on board. You'd want to be sure in this phase that the course is pilot tested, for example, for usability, make sure that the presentation is well received as well. And any feedback, you could consider them weaknesses, but not always. I mean, feedback is really good, but any feedback that you get could help to fix up any trouble issues or problem areas that the learning audience, when the course is released, it'll be worked out for them, hopefully, by having some kind of a pilot and at least a review. And testing the content is really good as well. If you have some lab exercises, for example, if you could get someone with fresh eyes to go through those and ensure that they are accurate. So as I mentioned, you do want SME approval and make sure they'll help make sure that the intended purpose of the course content is actually being met, and they'll give you that approval. And then in the next phase, it's implementation. And so that's when the learners actually register and can take the course that you have developed. And this might involve uploading the content to an LMS, a learning management system. It might mean having it posted somewhere on a web portal, whether it's secured or just open to the public. So these are kinds of things that you want to think about. A learning management system can be really helpful if you are wanting to monitor the learner's training experience for issues and also some opportunities that you can learn about from their feedback to improve the course for others as well, future learners and future iterations of the course. And then the final phase in the framework model is evaluation. So that phase is really all about determining if the training is doing its job and if the learners are learning what you intended them to learn from the subject matter. Since the ADDIE model can be used as a continuous improvement cycle, any feedback that you gather can then be inserted into each of the design phases and into the analysis phase as well, as you're going to rework and update that course in future iterations. So there's two types of evaluations to consider. One is a formative evaluation, and that's done at each stage of the ADDIE model, and the results are fed back into the subsequent iterations. And then another type of evaluation is the summative evaluation, and that happens after the evaluation phase, and it focuses on what the outcome is of the overall training program. And that is how you use the ADDIE training model.